Welcome to the Big Mike Fun Podcast, where you learn about advanced wealth building strategies from real estate investing to creating massive ROI and secured retirement profits. So pour yourself a cup of coffee, grab a notepad, and lean in. Because Big Mike has got the mic, starting now.
Welcome to the Big Mike Fun Podcast. I'm the Big Mike Zlotnik, and today it is my pleasure and a privilege to welcome Ken Van Liew. Hi, Ken.
Hello, Mike. Thank you for having me here today.
Thank you very much for coming as a guest on the podcast. So you are a New Yorker like me, and you've got a great history, and you've developed over $1 billion of real estate here in New York City. So it's so awesome to have such a great an officer and a gentleman to come on the podcast.
Oh, well, thank you very much. You can see my Yankees poster in the back. So yeah, I'm a true New Yorker, the Giants helmet in the back. So if you like the Mets or the Jets, you're probably live in Queens. Not just kidding.
So funny. Giants and Yankees go together. And you're so right. It's just like a combination. I don't know why, but it works.
Yeah, I know. Exactly. You know, I've been to both tailgate parties. They both work the same, you know.
Yeah, there's some magic to that. But before we talk about real estate, couple of words about Ken. You have a wonderful family, married for many years. Tell us a little bit about your kids, your family, just a couple of words.
Yeah, you know, they are my twins are the pride and joy, I used to say, you know, so, you know, twice the work, but twice the joy. I have boy and girl twins that are going to be 30 this year. My daughter married a doctor and living in New York City. My son is serving the country as a U.S. intelligence Marine officer. And my youngest just bought a house at 24 in Connecticut. So my kids are doing great, still married to the same woman after 34 years. And, you know, life is good on the family side. Thank you for asking.
Congratulations on such a great family success. That's awesome. So, and yeah, when you say twins, you think of small kids, but they're grown-up twins.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So let's switch to the business a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your kind of adventure in New York City. You've touched a lot of great real estate here. You've developed over $1 billion worth of real estate, and you have a great best-selling book, Modern Wealth Building Formula. So I would love to hear about your adventure in New York City and your book.
Sure. You know, it's you probably know, being from the New York metropolitan area, but once upon a time when we were kids, you know, they used to bring us to New York for class trips, you know, and I was always fascinated by the architecture of New York, and, you know, started as a young kid, you know, always liking, you know, playing with trucks and construction stuff, that one day I may build something in New York. And, you know, I didn't really know how to get started in real estate. The journey started with me becoming a civil engineer, and then not really like sitting, you know, still and not talking to anybody and wanting to be out there in the New York City, you know, excitement. And, you know, I went into construction, and I journeyed into real estate through learning how to build projects in New York City. And that's kind of how it started, you know, and then it led to other things, you know, but it you know, everybody had a superpower, I guess. And my superpower was building. And then when I figured out how I could build something for myself, that's when I kind of took the next step, you know.
Yeah, that's great. How do you go from an engineer, I guess, working for somebody else, to becoming a developer? New York is an expensive place to invest and develop. And I know a number of developers, and it's everyone has a different step. But how do you cross that bridge? How do you get capital, and how do you get your first project rolling? A big project. Sounds like most of your projects have been very substantial projects.
Yeah, and you know, I call it kind of reverse learning, you know, in the sense where we started big, but we also proved, you know, the Modern Wealth Building Formula, which is the book, works, you know, across the board for, you know, any type of small business, whether you're wholesale and fix and flipping, skyscrapers. So, you know, how do you actually go from an engineer to getting started? So, you know, for you, those engineers out there, or anybody technical, you know, it's a way of thinking. You know, the good news is real estate is not quite as difficult in the thinking and, the brain damage that you have to do trying to figure out an engineering formula, and that real estate, is something that if you could bring people together into a real estate investment, any type of engineering thought processing skill that you had is exactly what you need along with any other type of career that you could bring people together. But, and being an engineer and realizing, that I could think about numbers and, finance and, logistics and bringing people together, I really started to look at, what was I doing? I started as a civil engineer that moved into building, and then when I started building for someone, I realized, hey, there's architecture and there's engineers and, there's, a structural engineer that does the building and a civil engineer that does the road work. If you have a little understanding and then learn on the opposite a little bit about finance, it's really about just putting together a little puzzle. So, I'm not saying that there's any prerequisite to go into real estate. I just happen to have, my background. You could be in business, you could be a school teacher, you could be in a clerk of the works. There's anything you could do and step into real estate. It's really just a matter of believing that you could bring people together and to present a real estate investment. Because if real estate investment exists and it's going to, pay a return, there's a lot of people out there with money that are going to invest with you. And that, That's why your Big Mike fund.
Yeah, makes sense. Of course. It's just New York City is particularly more complicated. Lots of people venture into real estate in a small, but New York takes almost it's like a giant leap. But because it's New York, you can't go small here. Go big or go home. But let's kind of dissect into current market. And what are you doing anything today? Are you building anything today? Just curious, what's kind of your recent projects and where things are going? We are in this unprecedented time in this post-COVID world and hyperinflation, and Fed is raising interest rates. I'm just curious, what are you seeing out there?
Yeah, I see tremendous opportunity. We were just selected by Dennis Quaid, and we're putting together a national documentary that's going to go out to 60 million households called Real Estate Today, Keys to Investing. So we're going to be shooting that in New York City and probably have some footage at Metro Tech. So I think there's a tremendous opportunity. I don't think, the adjustment in interest rates are really going to create any havoc from a real estate investment standpoint. I think there's a lot of people that own households that are, panicking because they don't have enough cash flow coming in. But, what I've doubled down on is basically real estate development. I have over 100 acres of real estate development we're doing nationwide. We have a bunch of projects in New Jersey. I bought the famous former Larson's Turkey Farm in Chester, New Jersey. We're developing downtown Chester. We have restoration of a 100-year-old restaurant. We have a CVS pharmacy, affordable housing, market rate housing, offices, etc. I have another site in Bedminster. We're doing self-storage, townhomes, residential. Another site in Bridgewater doing residential. We have a huge project in North Carolina, 45 acres. We're doing over 200 units, self-storage, hotels, wellness centers, etc. Downtown developments. We were just talking about taking over a downtown project in Lewisburg, North Carolina. So we're very active in transformation, of upcoming towns and creating destinations with multi-use and etc. And that's what I did in my comment about doubling down when New York kind of became a little sideways there for the last couple of years. Just, we didn't know what was going on. And, with everything happening out there, it's good to see, New York and companies with all that real estate in New York promoting for people to come back to work, not that I want to go back to New York City. I'm enjoying what I'm doing now. I call it building skyscrapers horizontally, right? So we're covering a lot of flat ground, acres and acres, instead of going vertical for the time being. So
yeah, that's a great commentary. My 2 cents is certainly New York has its beauty, but it's been in a slow recovery mode post-COVID. It has come back quite a bit. It's not the same as pre-COVID, but at the same time, you're right that horizontal skyscrapers or going into kind of middle town America, average town America might present a bit different opportunity than the city itself. So what type of, I guess the type of projects you mentioned, you're doing a broad range of investments. Is there anything particularly interesting to you, or are you just taking advantage of the opportunities as they come? Is it opportunistic investing, or more like opportunistic / value investing, or is this some kind of a strategy? You're going into specific towns because you feel that a big factory is going to go in, or something like that. Just curious, how you select your deals.
Yeah. No, I think it's definitely around the opportunistic sense where, over the last few years, you've heard a lot about opportunity funds, et cetera, and, long term. And I think, the approach is more on a opportunistic sense where it's longer term development, like where a lot of people are in a frenzy to buy something at a 6 cap and have cash flow. But if you have the patience and you're a long-term investor and looking at opportunity funds, the fund that we want to focus this year in creating is really like an entitlement fund, which will bring all types of real estate opportunities to the table. Because as you enter markets as, a real estate expert, people, want to succeed and hang out with experts. So, you'll naturally gravitate to deals where we're not out there competing. So, I guess, we would say we're going to continue to focus on, how we can help towns recover, essentially. One of the towns we're doing a lot of stuff is Lewisburg, North Carolina, which is just, on the outskirts of the triangle. It's got an airport, a college, it's a really high potential North Carolina town leading to some other opportunities. But that is really, a destination play. And, with, some of the things we chatted about, I think destination is going to come back, where, it was questionable for a while. So that's where we've been focused.
Okay, I appreciate that sharing. So back to your book, what is the formula? What's the modern wealth building formula? Is this simply just real estate investing? I'm certainly a big supporter, but I'm curious, is there a wonderful formula, or is this just a strategy, or just give us a little more color on what the book talks about?
Yeah, I wrote it from my perspective in the sense that, when I came into real estate, I hadn't started learning from the bottom down. I was building these large projects, but I really didn't know anything about real estate. So I created what I call as my own find, fund, and facilitate program. Because in any real estate transaction, you have to learn how to find deals, fund them, and then facilitate the process. Some people may say manage the asset, but coming from development, it's more or less facilitate the process. So it all started about how do you find, fund, and facilitate. So it tells you a little bit about, I looked at real estate almost like an ice cream store, 35 different flavors. How do you get started? And then when you kind of cut through all the minutia, you realize that real estate development is the zenith of real estate, and that you could learn in reverse, but you have to break it down because it's like any other game. One of my successes was in sports and football, baseball. So, I talk about where are you at in the lineup? Where are you starting with your career? What's the pregame warm up, and how do you get set in order to go into real estate? There's a little bit about mindset. There's a little bit about putting your systems in place. And then there's a little bit about execution. And it also has a twist to whole personal development, because me being successful where I'm at today, it just wasn't about 137,000 hours of studying real estate, 2 master's degrees, PE license, site safety license, all of that, New York City, more S piled high and deep, it was really about, executing and learning. And the modern wealth building formula was my method on how I learned, and then how I proved on how it applies right down to a residential wholesale fix and flip. And the context was how I developed my first project, which was a $17 million assisted living facility, 113 beds right out of the box, not really knowing anything about real estate. So that's what the modern wealth building formula is. And, the thing after I wrote it, I realized that the modern wealth building formula isn't about how to master real estate investing. It's almost how to master business, real estate business, because, when you've developed $100 million projects, it's identical to building a business. A $10 million business, a $1 million business, you need all of those components. You have to find the business, you have to fund the business, you have to facilitate the business. So the formula applies, essentially for those out there that want to get started, for those out there that are in real estate, how to take it to the next level, for those out there that want to start a business, the modern wealth building formula will apply.
Yeah, makes sense. I do share the common theme that if you get the right processes, systems, and people in place, you could tackle a small project or a larger project, and the return on time is drastically greater in a bigger project. It just comes down to, can you really raise the capital for a bigger project versus a smaller one? Most people gravitate to what they can afford, and at least in my experience. But you could do bigger. You could reach for the skies if you have the mindset. You're absolutely right. But let's just chat a little bit about the most recent kind of what's happening out there. So you are obviously picking and choosing your projects long term, as you mentioned. And but what are you doing today specifically? What changes are you making? Anything that's happening now is impacting your new decisions? Is this time to sell? Is this time to refinance before rates go up? I'm just curious, what specific moves are you making today as a successful developer?
Yeah,
in the current inflationary environment.
Yeah, I think people are reacting and selling at a higher price, and it all depends on what your objective. We've chosen to sit tight, hold on to our assets, move forward our developments, bring more funding in place, to capture more opportunities, continue to leverage, and unless you're ready to hang up your shoes, I'm not saying that you don't want to start selling off your assets. If you're in a situation where cash flow is tight and one of your residential assets haven't been performing, you may want to consider stabilizing it, right? Or if you want to react and try to sell it, what I'm finding is a lot of the data that people are giving to us on rent rolls and stuff like that aren't necessarily what's actually happening. So instead of trying to do all kinds of brain damage, from my perspective, we've been doing a lot of observing. We're finding that it's almost to the point where it's cheaper to build. If the material prices weren't escalated coming out of COVID, it's almost cheaper to build than to build multifamily. So I've been been focused on putting some multifamily projects in place, both mid-rise vertically down in North Carolina, but besides spreading out and doing townhomes, and that's kind of what I'm seeing happening. I think there's been a little bit of kind of questioning, is there really a housing shortage? Are people not putting their houses on the market because they've been protected because of government protections, or on mortgage foreclosures, etc. Are some of the questions people are racing around in their heads. But I think from the perspective of real estate investing, there's a lot of opportunity, and my suggestion is sit tight, if you're holding right now.
Yeah, makes sense. I do like the thesis of, again, long-term investing, and if you don't have to sell, why sell? I crack this joke. in New York City, again, historically, the only thing you regret is selling. If you could just hold on to everything, and everything seems to have done really well for many years. The appreciation has slowed down in the last couple of years. COVID has done a little bit of disservice for the city and been really great for Florida and a number of other markets. But it's coming back. I think not exactly the same, but it's still coming back. Once the Broadway's back, once the restaurants are back full scale, a lot of other real estate will pick up.
It's funny you say that, because I regret I had this small little villa in Florida that I bought, 20 years ago or 15 years ago when my parents lived in the Villages, and it was inland in Florida. And I bought it for 100,000. I found out they're selling them for 300 now. I think I dumped it for 125 when my parents moved back to New Jersey or something. But it's crazy, the appreciation of real estate, and it goes along the lines of, your first question, what's going to happen with the interest rate. So, if people are panicking because the news is scaring you, don't panic. Sit tight. Everything's going to be okay.
Well, we have a pretty good idea what's going to happen with interest rates. It's pretty likely they're going to go up substantially over the next few quarters or months, and it's almost unprecedented. Some really there's very little. Well, there's nothing that has happened like this in the past, where the rates have gone up fast from very low point. And that's was kind of the theme process. But the good news is that real estate is a great hedge against inflation, and even rising interest rates may slow down the inflation. It's still something that most folks, they can hang on to. It's definitely a great wealth building, long-term wealth building asset class. Probably most of the wealth in the States has been built through real estate. So any other great kind of thoughts, comments, suggestions? You kind of alluded that you are developing in Carolinas, a little bit more of that. Do you see any other opportunities for folks to invest capital? Where should folks park their capital? Right now, there's a really, really bizarre conundrum right now. I was just listening to Bloomberg, and a lot of great opinions. There are as many opinions as there are analysts and professors and so on. But we are in a bizarre time where it feels like the stock market is dropping, the bond market is dropping with the rising interest rates. Real estate, you're sitting tight, trying to see what's going to happen. Where should folks invest besides their own education, which is probably number one? Get better and learn, invest in yourself. But where do you see opportunities? Is it better to sit a little bit more cash and wait for the opportunities to come in, or sitting on cash is not good during an inflationary environment?
Yeah, great question. So a couple points you touched upon. Number one, I want your listeners to keep one thing in perspective. Because I disagree in the sense that nothing's ever happened before, because when I bought my first house in 1989, the interest rates were 18%. So, if you want to talk about choking, as a young couple at 27 years old in 1989, I was choking. So keep that in perspective. So back to the question of being in the conundrum and where do you invest capital? What I have found, and you mentioned it, the bond market and stock markets are actually acting opposite than a lot of history, right? So there is a conundrum in the sense that the data is creating confusion, and it comes down once again, what are investment basics, right? And you asked a question before, where am I headed? I'm headed into technology in the sense that we want to have, the blockchain technology and the data sources in order to create, a real estate fund that gives people to invest in that's not like any other. We're trying to create, not trying, because trying doesn't exist. We are creating a fund for people to invest that's unique in the sense that has proprietary softwares and intellectual properties and blockchain technology. So it has the liquidity that the stock market has, because the question is arising, hey, why is the stock market going down and the bond market going down when one should be going up and one should be going down? It's a result of a lot of things, interest rates going up, a war on the other side of the country, the politics that are going on. It's the same story, but it brings us back to the basics, right? Real estate's going to always cycle, but it's always going to go up, in my opinion, right? And you've seen it through the history, right? It's historically, it's always went up. So if you enduring the conundrums where the media is creating confusion and fear, go back to the basics, go back to the modern wealth building formula. How do you find a project? How do you fund a project? How do you facilitate? How do you invest in something, which comes down to, deal with people with integrity, introduce, meet, if you want to be passive, find, a fund that's doing well and put some money into a real estate fund, find developers or real estate, private groups that you can trust and invest, or, go out there, educate yourself. Don't be afraid of the news and rhetoric that's out there. Stick to the basics and go out there and invest in real estate like you just do any other year. Keep it simple.
Thank you for that. So what kind of fund you're creating? Just a couple of words about your fund, and how would the folks reach out if they wanted to learn a little more about that?
Yes. Yes, the fund that we're creating is the Global Freedom Fund, and it's going to, I guess if you wanted to define it, an entitlement opportunistic fund that's going to allow people to invest in some of our long-term developments, benefit from, assets that we'll be, obtaining along the way, and really create, a legacy behind that, with the whole educational platform behind it, and a vertical integration, just from the skills that we've developed over the years in global real estate strategies, and being a big time New York City real estate advisor, essentially taking the services that we provided to third parties over the years, bringing them in house, creating a fund around it, and creating the opportunities that I believe aren't necessarily offered to the everyday people. Where, hey, you can get involved in something and come really watch it, like come out of the ground and build, and watch, areas in the country transform. And that's where we're headed, and have the whole, blockchain and data resourcing and intellectual property behind it. So people that are investing feel that, hey, we're on top of the game, not only in real estate, but in technology and information and data, and create a legacy around that.
That's great. How would folks reach out?
Go to kenvanliew.com, KenVanLiew.com. Click on the button and become an expert, and you can get to myself or, someone to give you a call, and, just free conversation, complimentary advice, and, how we can synergize and work together.
That's great. Ken, thank you very much for sharing. I appreciate that. We're running out of time. As I say often, all good things come to an end. So does this interview. Appreciate your wisdom, and thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Big Mike Fund Podcast. To receive your copy of Mike's How to Choose a Smart Real Estate Fund book, head to BigMikeFund.com or visit Amazon and type Mike Zlotnick. Keep listening and keep investing Big Mike style. See you on the next episode.